In 2010, Mattel introduced the world to Monster High. Monster High is a range of dolls similar to Barbie, except they're all Hammer horror-esque monsters. You've got the vampires, the werewolves, the werecats, the Frankenstein's monsters, etc. But now all prettied up and utterly fangtastic. This exciting range of fashion dolls were designed by Garret Sander, who started out designing packaging for pre-existing Mattel properties and ended up designing his own toy line. That's the dream, isn't it? Get in doing packaging and end up changing the shape of the toy biz forever. I have a whirlwind relationship with Monster High. I know who a lot of the characters are. I know Dracula, Claudine Wolf, Frankie Stein. For a good 4 years or so, I managed the toy section in a high street discount retail chain store. Most of my Monster High knowledge is through osmosis, having stocked and sold a lot of Monster High toys and dolls. I liked seeing the store shelves full, emblazoned with bright, good-looking packaging and those adorable dolls. I've played all of the Monster High video games casually. Yep, the truth is, I kind of have a soft spot for Monster High. This tier list is my excuse to share that passion, and maybe together we can figure out what it is that manages to draw even the boys to this line of dolls intended for girls. Boys like me, 100% certified lad. What is it about Monster High that has garnered such a passionate following? So let's get it on. In this 2025 edition of the Monster High tier list, we will be looking at 8 entries, the original 7 entries from the 2024 video, and a new bonus entry focusing on Skulltimate Secrets, which was released after the original video came out. If you've seen the original video and just want to jump forward, feel free to use the video chapters feature, or skip to the time on screen now. Because there are only a few proper games, we will be looking at the versions for other platforms if they are significantly different. We will be placing them from spooktacular through awful, bootiful, creepy, dreadful, exhumed, and frightening. Let's get right into it then. M-O-N-S-T-E-R, monsters, monsters so bizarre.
Our first game on this tier list is the Nintendo DS version of Ghoul Spirit. This is a basic adventure game with little actual substance. Being a THQ-published title during their kiddie filth era, such low-effort trash is unfortunately to be expected. It was Imagine Engine, a subsidiary of Foundation 9, behind this game's development. They predominantly developed children's titles, and according to their development history, the company seems to be intimately familiar with making bad games. Should come as no surprise then, that the Nintendo DS version of Ghoul Spirit isn't very good, but rather very isn't good. It might even be bad. You get to choose what kind of ghoul you want to be from 6 different ghoul types: Gorgon, Werewolf, Mummy, Vampire, Zombie, or as the game calls it, Mashup Monster, which is a weird way of saying Frankenstein's monster. Then you complete dry fetch quests for various Monster High characters. The game has a basic map screen and a quest log, a bare-bones mission system in the form of text messages, and small but admittedly quaint-looking areas to explore. The game lacks collectibles or any kind of motivation at all, definitely feeling like more of a cash grab than a labor of love. This reminds me a lot of those 2 bad Nintendo DS games we looked at on the BB Blocksberg tier list. Much like those, this has tacked on minigames that aren't properly explained. And also, much like those, Ghoul Spirit is definitely a game I simply cannot recommend to anyone. I'm afraid this one is already dead, so we're burying it back into the frightening tier. Maybe this would have appealed to some players back in the day on account of being a portable title, but something more top-down and pixel art based would have not only aged better, but would have also been a tried and tested way of putting an adventure game together quickly.
M-O-N-S-T-E-R, monsters, monsters so bizarre.
Next we have the Nintendo Wii version of Ghoul Spirit. Same publisher, same developer. I was surprised to find out just how similar they actually are. I'm committed to treating them as separate entries, because although they are similar, the input methods are a little bit different, and the game has some unique features on Wii. So this is essentially the same game, but with a lot more polish. For starters, the graphics are, as to be expected, much nicer. Characters look on model this time, the environment is a lot more detailed, there are now 3D models and decorations strewn about too. Some of it looks like a Nintendo DS game got blown up to full television size, but that's also part and parcel of the Monster High aesthetic, especially this early on, while it was still finding its footing. The gameplay itself is awfully similar, though there are some changes made to suit the Wii Remote and Nunchuck combo. Instead of staring at a map on the second screen, you now have a bat familiar that faces in the direction of whatever mission or quest you're trying to complete. The minigames appear to be much better explained. A lot of my criticisms for this game in particular are that its style of gameplay never really lends itself to Nintendo Wii, nor does the seemingly endless fetch questing, sometimes to and from the same room several times, just to complete one character's set of missions. It takes about half an hour to complete any one character's missions, and most of the time is spent on loading screens, or running down the school halls over and over again. The teenage girls that would have played this game, I'm not so sure they would have enjoyed it. I know I don't speak for all teenage girls, but I do speak for the teenage girl inside of me that is fighting to get out. She, straight up hates this game. Not as painful as the DS version, though. This goes into the dreadful tier.
M-O-N-S-T-E-R, monsters, so bizarre.
So in 2012, THQ as we knew it then ended up falling apart and eventually going bankrupt. It is unsurprising then that Mattel had to seek out a new publisher for their licensed drivel. Though given the time frame, maybe Mattel walked and then THQ couldn't recover. Who can say? Now published by Little Orbit and developed by Game Machine Studios LLC, the Nintendo DS version of 2012 Skulltimate Roller Maze is a rather generic, run-of-the-mill racing game with some mechanics I'm not particularly fond of. For starters, you have a team of 3 racers which you can cycle between, but it feels kind of pointless. Each one can hold an item, and they have their own special skill, which I suppose might lend some sense to having 3 team members, but like I said, only one of them is on screen at any one time. What's the point? Well, the team mechanic's true purpose will become more apparent as we move on to the version for slightly more powerful platforms. But let's finish up here first. Because it is a roller skating game, bumping into enemies can knock you off balance or even throw you to the ground. It is always immensely frustrating when this happens, and it seems like the enemy can do this to you all the time, but I can't seem to do it to them consistently. Reminds me of getting hit by a combination of items in Mario Kart. Frustrating to say the least. All the standards are here: forward-facing projectiles, oil slicks, speed boosts. Like I said, run-of-the-mill mascot racer. Course design is generic, but fine. Unfortunately, the cornering is tighter than an old nun's arsehole, and the game is about as appealing too. Skultimate Roller Maze's performance and frame rate on Nintendo DS are also very rough, with the game feeling like it's about to buckle under its own weight. Much like Ghoul Spirit, it is clear that the Nintendo DS version exists out of a contractual obligation. I will be placing this into Exhumed tier. Now let's step things up.
M-O-N-S-T-E-R, monsters, so bizarre.
Because the Wii and 3DS versions of Skulltimate Roller Maze are more similar from a gameplay, engine, and graphics point of view, I have combined them both into this entry. The Wii version came out day and date with the DS version and features motion controls, so I avoided it for that reason, while the 3DS version released 3 months later and allows you to play with buttons and stuff, so that is preferable. You are seeing the Nintendo 3DS version in this footage, as that is the version I played for the list. Big improvement over the DS version, as if that's a shocker. A lot of the more prominent issues I experienced with the Nintendo DS version are not present here. There is a genuine reason for the ghouls to be switched around, with each one getting tired if they are skating for too long at any one time. This was probably left out with the DS version due to limitations or development time or budget. The acceleration and brake have now moved to the triggers, which feels more in line with contemporary racing games of the time, and the game doesn't lag anywhere near as bad as before. The order of the tracks has been switched around, and the graphical fidelity is much higher than the DS version, making it quite a looker of a game, honestly. It is still a run-of-the-mill mascot racer, but some of the identity that the game was threatening to have before is starting to surface, even if only subtly. Even folks who aren't interested in Monster High could maybe get something out of this. I'm moving this up to the creepy tier. Maybe worth a look if you're like me and you've got to play a little bit of everything. Otherwise, avoid.
M-O-N-S-T-E-R, monsters, so bizarre.
Based on the film of the same name, 13 Wishes is a more standard platformer, which after these other genres is something of a welcome change. To make sense of what the game is about, we need to quickly go over the plot of the film. That's right, this is a movie tie-in. Hundreds or even thousands of years ago, Gigi Grant, a magical genie, tries to stop her sister, the dark genie Wisp, from plunging the world into darkness during an upcoming eclipse. With the use of a magic mirror, the plan is foiled. This mirror, however, was broken into 13 pieces, and To aid in her quest to achieve ultimate power, Wisp has spread those shards throughout the world inside of the lamp. Centuries later, the disaster begins anew as the lamp, discovered by an excavation team, has managed to find its way to the attic of Monster High. While in detention for causing trouble on the first day of school, Howleen Wolf, younger sister of popular character Claudine, accidentally releases Gigi from the lamp. To start with, the wishes that Howleen makes are small and mostly insignificant, but when Wisp's evil influence manages to take hold of Howleen's psyche, she then wishes for her sister Claudine to disappear. The rest of the main cast discover that Claudine is now trapped inside the lantern, and together they devise a plan to get trapped inside too, so they can break Claudine out of the lantern and stop Wisp from taking over the world during the next eclipse, when this Emil-looking ass covers the sun. However, the plan soon morphs into one to free Gigi from the influences of her sister, by finding the 13 pieces of the broken mirror and restoring it, allowing Wisp to be trapped once again. Each of the shards is kept behind some kind of crystal maze-esque puzzle, or a series of traps, so the idea lends itself pretty well to the world of video games. Well, does it? Actually, in a rather unexpected turn of events, the 13 Wishes video game is a continuation of the film, where instead of succeeding, the main cast fail to stop Wisp and she becomes all-powerful. A rather ballsy surprise to base your video game adaptation of a film on a previously non-existent bad ending. But a welcome change, sure. So now the main cast are once again plunged into the world of the lamp, having to find orbs, mirror pieces, and their fellow ghouls in a last-ditch attempt to defeat Wisp. I'm kinda glad I took the time out of one busy morning to watch the film, because not only was it actually an okay film, it gave me a greater context for the actual game. I'm sure there are other movie games that set themselves after the film in a hypothetical lost scenario, but it's the first time for me seeing that. Well played. Speaking of well played, I played a little bit of this one. In all honesty, it's a bit of a brain teaser, a bit of a head scratcher. It's a platformer, yes, but it's really more of like condensed Prince of Persia or Assassin's Creed, in the sense that there's a lot of hanging onto ledges, shimmying and moving boxes around onto switches. The actual platforming parts aren't too hot due to the camera not always showing you where you need to be or giving you enough of a visual clue as to the depth of some of the jumps you need to make. Each of the ghouls have to be unlocked, and they have their own special freaky floor you can use to navigate the obstacles. You can cycle through any of the characters at all times once you've unlocked them. Could you imagine only being locked to 2 or 3 of the characters at any one time, just arbitrarily? I'm getting bits of Garfield's Nightmare, maybe a waft or two of that Joe Wonder game that I played as part of a publisher opportunity not too long ago. A combination of basic, inoffensive platforming that could do with being loosened up, and some puzzles that ultimately boil down to just move box. Compared to other games we've seen so far, this is something of a solid title. Straight into bootiful. If you're looking for potential gems on Nintendo DS, consider this one.
M-O-N-S-T-E-R, monsters, monsters so bizarre.
Unlike the Nintendo DS version, the other releases of 13 Wishes are essentially the same game as each other. Whether that be on Wii, Wii-U, or Nintendo 3DS, they play the same and have the exact same levels and stages. I would have played the 3DS version, but Citra doesn't get updates anymore, so I dusted off the Wii U console for this one. This version of the game then, it's a proper 3D platformer with large open areas and some actual platforming. Really, there's essentially 2 games here. There's the first style of game, the hub world, where there are small side quests, locked doors, and level entrance portals to find. This is the part I don't really like, as it is just more of Ghoul Spirit, the game that refuses to stay dead. I'm much more interested in the better, latter half of the game. I'm talking about the platforming stages. These also feature the occasional on-rails segment to break up the monotony. The stages involve some basic, dull platforming with the occasional use of your ghoul's freaky floor. For example, Claudine can sniff out new paths.
What's that smell?
Cleo can teleport, Frankie can detach her hand and let it go for a walk. Hold on. We're meant to be Frankie's hand, but you look over there, she's still got both hands. Wait, she doesn't keep this one up her vagina. Nah, no matter how you slice it, This isn't a particularly rewarding game. It's something of a halfway house between a solid platformer, but with a strong and highly noticeable piss aftertaste, like a Data Design Interactive title. A couple of things that would have greatly improved the gameplay for me, personally, would be getting rid of the reversed vertical camera. This isn't a flight sim, for Christ's sakes. Next, the characters all slide around like the whole game takes place on ice. It takes a little while after moving the stick to get going, which has led to so many misjudged jumps that wouldn't be a problem in practically any other platformer. This doesn't happen if you hold down the run button, so you have to hold down the run button all the time. And then one more thing, limiting each stage to just 2 or 3 playable ghouls per run is incredibly annoying when it comes to replaying or trying to find more collectibles. Unlike the Nintendo DS version, this means having to play and complete each stage over and over again, especially considering you usually only get to choose who just one of the characters will be due to stage hazards that require certain characters to be able to navigate. The obvious solution is just to add in a character selector. In fact, the game has one, but only in the hub world, and only at one specific locker, in the very starting room of the game, which means you need to traipse down the same hallway every single time you want to change your character, despite it basically being a simple character select menu. When you switch characters, it is pretty much instantaneous, and the minus button on the Wii U is not being used, so why not just map the character select menu to that? To find out how many goals you have left. Good luck. The game says I only need 31 to access the final area, the attic. I get to the attic and it says you need to complete more goals. It would be nice if it told me how many I've beaten and how many it wants me to beat, but no, that would make sense, wouldn't it? As for side missions, these annoying fetch quests are made worse by the requirement to run back to the first room every time you want to switch characters. And then you're just examining every single locker until you find the one that has the very specific item in it. Even the little things fuck me off, you know? Like, what's wrong with this footage? If you got it, pat yourself on the back. Ain't no shadows cast on your character model. They go to the effort of making this really pleasant looking desert location with atmospheric lighting and effects, only to then forget to cast simple environment shadows on the player model. Nope, they're all just baked into the environment. And once you see it, you simply can't not see it. While I would love to put this in a high tier, I just have to be honest with myself. Too much of this game pisses me off big time, and yet, I still feel compelled to put this in a high tier. It's going to have to go into beautiful tier, but with a caveat. It's a B tier game only if you have the patience for this sort of thing, otherwise it's not something worth playing at all. I think a few small tweaks would turn this into something far more enjoyable and easy to recommend, but it wouldn't necessarily fix the game's problems, just make them more bearable.
M-O-N-S-T-E-R, monsters, monsters, so bizarre.
It is the very first Monster High game I ever played. This is something of a mixture of 2 previous games. There's Ghoul Spirit DNA with the quest system, exploring the school and creating your own ghoul, because of course Ghoul Spirit refuses to stay dead. And there's also 13 Wishes DNA in the form of great looking visuals and platforming mechanics. In short, New Ghoul In School is a genuinely okay game, which gave me a false impression of what the rest of the franchise's games would be like. So to begin with, you create your own ghoul to represent you. The game treats this as a unique selling point, obviously forgetting the fact you could do this 4 years earlier in Ghoul Spirit. You do have more, I guess, species of ghouls to pick from. You can be a Cyclops, which just looks... yikes. Seems kind of a waste to have selectable ghoul types and then they don't have any special traits. A werewolf being able to see in the dark, for example, or a vampire having some kind of stealth mechanic. Look, I'm not saying I want Oblivion or whatever, but at the same time, I want my choice of species to mean something. Then you're told it's time to go to school for your first day. No fun little cutscene where you get a letter inviting you to the school or anything like that. No context. It's just one block of text. It's your first day at Monster High. That feels cheap. Immediately you're in control of your ghoul, just outside the front door to the school. And once you walk forwards a little ways, you are stopped by Frankie Stein, who acts as the tutorial, telling you to see Headmistress Bloodgood. But at this point, pretty much the entire school is open to you, so you can explore if you like. There are glowing bugs and pennants to collect which will reward you with in-game currency and achievements or trophies if you're playing on platforms where those are supported. In-game currency can be spent on clothes for your ghoul to wear. There's a whole slew of them to collect, and that's where the bulk of the playtime goes. If you do go to see Headmistress Bloodgood, you essentially begin the game's story. Though to call it that is incredibly generous, as it's the same to and fro thing from Ghoul Spirit. There is a new mechanic where you will sometimes be required to find things by pressing a button and following an arrow. It seems that all the different ghoul types possess the same power, so I don't know what makes us special, that people in the game send us out to find shit for them. When it comes to navigating the school, you have a full map and an arrow you can follow to show you to your next goal. So it really seems beginner-friendly in that regard. Ghoul Spirit on DS could have done with a navigation guide, as could have 13 Wishes. There are also smaller minigames dotted throughout. A puzzle where you can only move in straight lines, like a Pokemon Ice Gym or the Skylanders lockpicking minigame. There is also a fear-leading minigame which requires you to memorize button locations, which is not hard, but it does require you to have your head screwed on. As with most Monster High games, New Ghoul in School does boil down to completing fetch quests for other students, but the unlockable clothes and the ability to create your own ghoul, along with some of the better parts of 13 Wishes platforming to help you navigate the school, are a suitable trade-off. This is a genuinely solid title. The iCoffin feed is updated as you play, giving you a metric ton of world building and Monster High fan service, but it does cause crashes on PC, so even some of the game's more interesting features end up being more of a curse than a blessing. It's hard to put into words quite what I like about New Ghoul in School. Depending on what kind of day I've had, my opinion could go either way on this one. Let's say beautiful for New Ghoul in School. I had a strange affection for it, but in an ideal world, 13 Wishes platforming would have felt as loose and fluid as this. So while this game has great controls, everything I dislike about Ghoul Spirit and 13 Wishes side quests are dialed up to the max in New Ghoul in School. I could probably recommend this one to anybody curious about the series, as it certainly embodies the franchise's vibes the closest.
MONSTER, monsters, monsters so bizarre.
So this is what you're all here for, I'm sure. My thoughts and impressions on Monster High Skulltimate Secrets, the unexpected first Monster High game in almost a decade. It was released on October 29th, 2024 on PC and all current consoles, coming to us from Outright Games, Casual Brothers, and P-Toon Studios. That's a lot of hands involved, and quite often in cooking, too many chefs spoil the broth, and yeah, that's kinda true here. The story is, well, it's there. It's vague at best. Taking a page from Ghoul Spirit and New Ghoul in School, it's your first day at Monster High. You make your own barely customizable ghoul and then hop off on an adventure. An adventure that basically consists of being the Mary Sue of Monster High. Allegedly, every few centuries or so, the school's loosely defined energy gets out of whack and must be put back in order by a group of students that Monster High, as an entity I guess, decides are up to the task. In this case, that's your ghoul and your three buddies, Draculaura G3, Claudine Wolf G3, and Frankie Stein G3, each sold separately, batteries not included. By sheer coincidence, the students who have been chosen to put the school's energy back in place are the three main characters and your stand-in XP Monster. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the G3 designs. I think even most Monster High fans seem to agree that the G3 designs are pretty rough, except for Frankie Stein. Whether you believe they're the product of toxic positivity at MATTEL, a misguided desire for representation of more accurate body types, or just a desire to explore new body types to freshen up the toy line, they haven't gone over all that well in the fandom. That said, I do like the designs a little more now having seen them in motion in this game, since they've been replicated fairly well and are animated smoothly. The game is lacking a lot of polish, gameplay-wise, but at least it looks good, which is generally a given with titles published by Outright Games. Looking good is good, but playing bad is bad. This is a very bland and extremely basic 3D platformer with a rudimentary map. It is kind of like what I'd been hoping for, a mixture of 13 Wishes platforming and New Ghoul in School's feeling of being at Monster High and exploring those hallowed Ween halls. Just nowhere near as good as it could have been, and it doesn't make you feel like you're a student at Mon High. While the game's world is sufficiently big enough to support a game of this type, the majority of the game's environments are exterior or underground, with the school itself being a little bit on the small side. Still a large map, but you don't spend a massive amount of time in Monster High as part of the story, but instead outside and under it. The game's insultingly easy achievements are a laugh at least. You get most of them from simply playing the game, with a couple falling into water, opening optional hidden doors, requiring a little more effort. You can easily beat this whole game, including the achievements, in well under 4 hours, and that's if you decide to take your time with it. For some people who are very busy, a nice short game is an attractive prospect, so I'm not going to knock it down too much for that. If you're a parent buying a game like this for your child, however, I'm sure you want it to have a little bit more meat on its bones. There is some longevity in the game's unlockable clothes. It isn't spelled out to you at all, but there is a store in the school where you can spend the game's collectibles on hairstyles and clothing options. Well, it is spelled out for you on the Steam discussions board, where it becomes increasingly more apparent how absurd it is that the store is hidden. A member of the Outright Games social team had to reveal the location of the store because nobody could find it. So at the store, it's nice to have clothes available to buy, but the hairstyles really should have been available from the get-go. I do at least appreciate that you can get a twin-tail hairstyle, but that really should have been available from the start. Speaking of customization, Skulltimate Secrets won't let you change your species or skin type during gameplay, but here's the thing, I can't think of any instance where allowing the player to change it after starting the game would be a problem. Clothing options, hair and hats, etc. are not species exclusive, so changing your ghoul type shouldn't be an issue either. I'd love to see this addressed in a patch, but let's face it, the game isn't getting one. Yeah, I mentioned polish earlier on, and this game sure needed some. Just playing casually, I managed to find an easily repeatable out-of-bounds glitch, which allows you to visit unloaded areas. The speedrun world record at time of writing is just under 15 minutes, which gives you some insight into just how short this game is and just how broken it can be. But let's say you play this game properly, what's the goal? So I mentioned the energies around the school. These manifest in hidden doorways that you need to find. Inside each is a sort of platforming challenge, and at the end of them is a ball of energy which can be collected. But all the game really keeps track of for completion is the keys, one of which is granted to you on entry to each of the main story's platforming sections. These 6 keys grant you access to the secret room underneath Monster High, where a final platforming challenge awaits. Beat that and the credits lay ahead of you, game done. These platforming challenges are ass. You get a special skill given to you before you start each one. There are 6 in total, 1 for each key, but in reality there's really only 2, a double jump and a dash move. These just come in 3 flavors each, 1 for each ghoul type. There are barriers around the school and in these challenges that require you to equip certain skills to destroy them. But apart from that, the difference between these moves is purely aesthetic. A double jump and a dash, that's it. The platforming challenges remind me of those hourglass stages in A Hat in Time, I guess. Their structure is devoid of any sense, constructed from pre-existing assets made for the school itself. There is one type of enemy, an evil trash can, that can't be destroyed, only temporarily stunned. If the bin collides with your monster, they get gobbled up, and you develop a vor fetish. This sends you back to an invisible checkpoint nearby, as does falling into the abyss below. Oh, and you can end up getting killed while you're respawning, but at the very least the game will remove the enemy responsible so it doesn't keep happening on loop. These platforming challenges feature different obstacles, such as timed platforms and moving platforms. These floating platforms are so loud, especially when so many of them are placed in close proximity to each other. Did they do QA with the sound turned off? The sound itself isn't so great either. I had a glitch after fast travel where one piece of music kept playing in the background at a low volume all the time, which persisted until I returned to the title screen. There is a lot of voice acting from what I presume is the cast from the main animated series. There's a nice handful of music tracks that the game cycles through as well. Most of these are pleasant, but they sound like someone handed in the Cubase demos and said, "So what work needs to be done here?" and they were just approved. They sound a bit MIDI? They're not unpleasant, just when I think Monster High I think typical horror eerie instruments like theremins, organs, pizzicato strings, you know, those hallmarks of dollar store Halloween music are missing here, and it makes me long for something closer to what was featured in New Ghoul In School or 13 Wishes. I guess one blessing can be found in the game's platforming. You briefly stick to the air when a platform disappears, and you briefly attach to the edge of a platform when you're about to fall off. It's subtle, and in some ways makes the platforming feel clingy and a little adhesive. But on the plus side, it gives you an extra fraction of a second to jump. and I'm sure it's a deliberate inclusion and not the result of a glitch. The writing is so ass. The first time a character used "of corpse" in a sentence, I genuinely laughed, but after the third or fourth time, it was just no longer funny. Everybody in the game is just so positive and friendly, and they're fostering this nice community, and I just don't buy it. OG Monster High had genuine bully characters that would constantly attack Dracula or Frankie, which gave them an opportunity to clap back, and it gave us some stakes. Popularity, joining a clique, there was some drama there. When everybody's friends with everyone else, there's no conflict, and that's kinda dull. Connected to the writing, the game's dialogue system, it's worse than useless. It serves no point. Your choices are false choices, fake lies. Nothing you say has any impact on the story at all. It doesn't even change the dialogue that follows. They're all disjointed and disconnected from what's going on. Your character may as well not speak at all, since your input doesn't matter. Your custom ghoul has no impact on the story at all. They merely serve as the puppet for the player to insert themselves into. When other characters do appear, such as Laguna here, they're delegated to simply being mission givers. There are plenty of quests to find, but they're all really well buried, and then just become go collect this or that thing. The typical fetch quest nonsense we see time and time again in Monster High games. Skultimate Secrets is borderline worth playing. It's on the cusp. I'm not sure where it really belongs in a general tier list, but when placed alongside the other Monster High games, it is definitely a strong, beautiful tier game. But I feel it sits behind the other B-tier games. And that's all of them. Let's go through the list once again, in summary. In frightening tier, Ghoul Spirit for Nintendo DS. I just couldn't get into this one. It's just so archaic and old-fashioned. There are plenty of games for Nintendo DS that do the adventure game thing well, and this is simply not one of them. The age group that Monster High is targeted at would likely find nothing to enjoy here, outside of being able to hang with the series characters at school. In Exhumed tier, we have Skultimate Roller Maze for Nintendo DS. It's a mere shadow of the more complete console and 3DS version, missing entire game features and having incredibly unappealing and primitive graphics. On a system with Mario Kart DS and Sonic All-Stars Racing, there's no reason to purchase and play Skultimate Roller Maze. In Dreadful tier, we have Ghoul Spirit for Nintendo Wii. A definite couple of steps up on the DS version, with better controls, visuals, and it just kind of gets the vibe of hanging out at Monster High with the ghouls a little bit better. I do enjoy the quips and jokes from Headmistress Bloodgood over the Tannoy. The game is a little more in character for the series and understands the assignment a little better. Not terrible. In Creepy tier, we have Skultimate Roller Maze for Nintendo Wii and 3DS. Borderline something. Almost somewhere. It would have been better if they were in carts, or maybe if they were on motorbikes. It's like masquerading the corpses of Monster High characters around lifelessly, playing pretend racing. It's missing that Monster High identity. In Beautiful tier, we have 4 titles. First up, the latest game to be released, Skulltimate Secrets. This is one for the Monster High fans, especially those who can stomach Gen 3. But I'd much sooner direct players to other games in this tier. If the unlockable skills had more variety, if the story was longer, a little more spoken dialogue here and there, and some properly choreographed cutscenes would give Skultimate Secrets the much needed edge to stand out against the other B tier titles, or perhaps even be an A tier. New Ghoul In School, the first Monster High game I played, and my introduction to the franchise's video games. It has less in the way of choreographed cutscenes, but it does have conversations where NPCs actually react to what you say, so it's just a little bit more immersive because of it. NGIS holds up about how I remember. Wish it was better, but it's still a good time. It genuinely deserves to be a better game than it is. 13 Wishes for Wii U and Wii and 3DS is a solid platformer really lacking in competent design, an easy recommendation to players who have patience with annoying games, otherwise avoid. Genuinely like this, despite it being as rough as it is. Always enjoyed the whole Arabian Nights theme in games like Disney's Aladdin, to Shantae, to Prince of Persia, and just about anything with that vibe. It's kind of romantic in a strange way. Game would have been so much better without the fetch quests and the obnoxious navigation. And at the top of Beautiful tier, we have 13 Wishes for Nintendo DS. Weirdly basic and practical, but why fix what isn't broken? This title utilizes each character's freaky flaw while avoiding the somewhat archaic nature of the big console's limited character selection on each stage. Genuinely a solid recommendation to anybody who's looking for Nintendo DS gems they may have missed for whatever reason. 13 Wishes for DS, while not particularly interesting, is a sturdy, well-made game, and when it comes to licensed games, that's usually the most you can ask for. And an awful and spooktacular nothing! Maybe someday we'll get a Monster High game that really appeals to my tastes and sensibilities. It is unfortunate that Skultimate Secrets didn't deliver an S tier or A tier experience. Fingers crossed that now Outright Games has had a chance to work with the license, any future Monster High games will deliver greater variety and a more fulfilling story experience. Why not adapt one of the films, such as Fright's camera action? That has varied locales, more opportunities to explore scenarios and locations outside of Monster High. I think that might be why 13 Wishes really does it for me, because it has a proper chance to explore different locations and archetypes. And that's the list. What do you think? Drop me a comment because I'm lonely. Also, any ideas on which franchises to tackle next? I'm always open to suggestions, drop it in the comments. No, seriously, interact, that'd be great. I am Escaper British, and you've been watching the Monster High tier list. Until next time, if we live that long.